Hi, my name is Jerika Hayes, and my project is called Transcendent Sounds of Retribution, Tanya Tagaq's Music as Protest. So hailing from Nunavut, Canada, Tanya Tagaq is an Inuk musician, writer, and activist known for her distinctive blending of traditional throat singing with rock and electronic elements. Throughout her career, her musical triumphs have been paired with moments of protest and defiance against settler notions of acceptability. Unfortunately, many critical appraisals of Tagaq have leaned so far into her identity as activist and provocateur that musical analysis has been left almost completely untapped. I seek to combine a discussion on her activism along with an exploration around her musical style and performance qualities and how they are a vital part in understanding the power she possesses as an activist artist. I argue Tagaq's vocal and performance style embodies the historic feminine intimacy of throat singing while reappropriating the art form to create what I'm referring to as a transcendent activism. My working definition of transcendent activism is as such, encompassing both established means of protest and non-established, traditional means of confrontation, as well as the subtleties, the positionality of an individual as inherent protest, and includes spiritual phenomena and the effect on the listener or audience as activism. So examining her music as protest is to understand the transcendent quality of her activism that comprises advanced musical technique, indigenous spirituality, her relationship with the audience, and the body. I'll begin my examination and analysis of Tagaq's music with her performance at the 2014 Polaris Prize ceremony. The night showcased her magnetism, skillful vocal work, improvisational prowess, and how the combination of those things, along with her Indigenous identity, truly set her apart in terms of musicianship and positionality for a different form of activism. Fellow Canadian musician Jeff Berner introduced Tagaq before her performance at the prize, describing her music as the following. You can hear the living land and the land under assault. You can hear children being born and conceived. You can hear the torture of the innocent and the glory of the tenacious, unstoppable force of life. If you listen, you can actually hear the sound of a people defying genocide to rise, wounded but alive, strong and ready to fight. Indeed, in the clip I will show from this performance, Tagaq accomplishes what Berner suggests she's capable of, but first and foremost, engages with the listener using her range and various specialized throat singing techniques. The clip demonstrates her effortless transitions between opposite ends of the timbral spectrum, sighs and breathy notes, low guttural growls and piercing highs, before ultimately sinking into a deep rhythmic pattern and staring at the audience intensely while the choir and band improvise around her. This repetitive bed of rhythm and sound happens multiple times throughout this performance and is a technique Tagaq uses, I believe, often in all of her performances to create a contemplative moment, a musical drone, and to forge a connection with the audience, pulling them into her space, her rhythm, her musical world. Tagaq's personhood in this performance calls the listener to engage with her on another level, that of sexual freedom and bodily autonomy. She wears sealskin arm cuffs, a low-cut, curve-hugging red dress, and has this scrolling list behind her of the names of murdered and missing Indigenous women. Each piece alone means something, but the combination is radical. In many interviews, Tagaq spoke on the overshadowing of the list by the controversy of her sealskin cuffs and calling out PETA in her acceptance speech. She spoke on these issues with CBC News after the win and amid the controversy, pointing to the hypocritical nature of the outrage over her people's seal hunt versus the silence towards the violence Indigenous women face. She stated plainly, when there's the names of 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women scrolling behind you at a big show like Polaris, and everyone's losing their mind over seals, that's a little terrifying. While this paper is not about her interviews attempting to bring political awareness, it is connected. Tagaq's musical nonconformity and display of sexuality allow her to take ownership of her body, the sounds it produces, and her power as a woman, demanding freedom and safety for herself and other women like her. As seen in the clip, Tagaq has a moment while producing a low, growling drone that she holds the audience's gaze, staring menacingly into the crowd. It's an unapologetic moment, an Indigenous woman making Indigenous sounds to a mostly white audience in a sexy red dress, effectively controlling the power of the entire room with her music. Tagaq's Massey Hall debut in 2015 is another performance that requires analysis. Like Polaris, she's accompanied by her two collaborators on drums and violin and keys and the Element Choir. However, this performance is one that is completely improvised. It features a broader range of synth sounds, especially in the bass range, and Tagaq uses more animalistic sounds like howls and screeches, as well as the droning technique, but this time leading to a more contemplative moment and a different sonic place. Tagaq herself takes a breather, immersed in the sounds made by her collaborators. One special moment in particular, I believe, appeals to our sense of the otherworldly and spiritual. As you'll hear in the clip, the rhythm the band has been playing changes, and Tagaq drops into a low, inhuman growl. The synth, triggered by this tone change, comes in with its own low hits, programmed to sound enormous and bassy. Tagaq flips into her higher range and sounds like she's almost speaking in tongues with several voices at once. The choir, meanwhile, is creating a cacophonous drone of improvised chatter. The effect is spooky, ethereal, unsettling, and exciting. Even after listening years later on a computer, you can still feel this sense of magic evoked. I do not believe it's reductionist or patronizing to look at moments of this performance and others as such, because the spiritual element appeals to our very existence as humans and our need for connection, both between ourselves and perhaps something greater. Tagaq's virtuosic vocalizing leaves room purposefully for this type of interpretation. And she has said, I like leaving room for other people to be part of the conversation, the no word conversation. As an activist, this method is leaving a lot of responsibility up to the listener. But this mutual respect has been proven successful with the high profile Tagaq has attained. Tagaq's performance at Massey Hall reflects both her goals as a performer and the way the audience is allowed to experience her performances. In her doctoral dissertation, To Listen on Indigenous Land, Nadia Shana discusses Tagaq's purpose in performing at places like this and others that could be seen as colonized or settler spaces. Chana asserts that Tagaq recontextualizes this type of space, a hall on a land that is undeniably stolen from Indigenous people, to reclaim it and effectively address multiple publics at a time. These publics being the crowd who would typically attend a concert at Massey Hall and those who would not be so welcome typically, both the us and the them. Chana also discusses how Tagaq and her collaborators use the concert hall setting to play with and disrupt the norms one expects while attending a concert in such a space, enacting their own type of retribution onto the audience, while also producing performances legible to any public that may be in attendance. This act contributes to the transcendental quality of her activism by transcending both the norms associated with the performance space and those who are allowed to experience such performances. The last example I wish to explore is the 2016 music video for Tagaq's song Retribution from the album of the same name. Musically, the choice to include a spoken word element would be attention grabbing for those familiar with Tagaq's past work or those tuning in for the first time. Her voice is soft but deliberate, enunciating clearly and emphasizing hard consonants. In the background, she begins to create the drone, slowly building momentum and urgency as the poem comes to an end. There are some other moments of vocal layering on the track besides this section, which is of course something unable to be produced in a live setting, but adds a unique dimension via recording. The song maintains a fairly familiar rock form until it swells in the last few minutes, adding more complex drum patterns, screeching, violins, and a menacing synth bass, all the while Tagaq powerfully vocalizing on top. Retribution is a sonic journey that leaves the listener breathless as the build is suddenly silenced and Tagaq's last notes reverberate in the air, alone now to ruminate on our journey.
Left invest in our time in hollow philosophies to placate the fear of our bodies returning back into our mother. Demand awakening, for the path we have taken has rotted. Ignite, stand upright, and conduct yourself like lightning, because the retribution will be swift.
What Tagaq does with this piece, I believe, assists in combating the otherness and reluctance to engage, sometimes associated with music produced by Indigenous people. In the introduction to his book, Hungry Listening, Resonant Theory for Indigenous Sound Studies, Dylan Robinson discusses this history of misunderstanding among settler, primarily white Canadians, grasping meaning from Indigenous music. Robinson discusses a listening that is guided by positionality as an intersection of perceptual habit, ability, and bias, and the idea that these biases can prevent white people from engaging with the music on a level that it's meant to be engaged with, or from trying at all. Combining Robinson's ideas with Chana's, one can begin to fully see Tagaq's ingenuity with Retribution. Someone who hasn't heard her music may not be interested in live recorded performances and may feel like it's too much of a stretch to glean meaning from a woman in a ball gown growling at a concert hall. But these same people may be more inclined to watch a music video. For familiarity of format, and the language of music videos is more translatable and relatable to a younger generation. By making such engaging, deliberate music videos, Tagaq is again contextualizing her music into a somewhat colonized space, i.e. the music industry, and claiming ownership and authority while simultaneously working with a framework other publics would understand. So not only an Indigenous or a non-Indigenous audience, but also the online and streaming generation, all while fully maintaining her authenticity. In conclusion, Tanya Tagaq uses her voice to bring a traditional technique into present day while simultaneously securing a future for Indigenous artists. Along with her singular voice, she uses her spirit, her passion, and her identity to transcend mundane types of activism and form connection with those who seek it. It is increasingly important that as scholars in our current musical landscape, we do not promote the idea of her work without examining the work itself, reducing scholarship to tokenization or othering in our research. By examining three contrasting examples, I was able to demonstrate the myriad of ways Tagaq goes about protest and conveying her messages, in sometimes unconventional ways or by using convention as a means to reclamation. In earlier interviews, Tagaq was hesitant to claim the title of activist, but more recently, she's changed her stance and seems to embrace the identity bestowed upon her for simply being herself. If my singing is a platform to help these issues being raised, then I will do it with love, with laughter, and with fists. Thank you very much for listening.